Hey guys, in this video, my goal is to share with you Google Web Stories and basically what it took for me to install it on both of my blogs, which is a food blog and a lifestyle blog, the good and the bad, and the ROI behind having Google Web Stories on your blog. So stay tuned. I'm going to go through everything that I went through, including all the issues that I had installing the plugin, also how I create the content for the web stories, where I get the ideas, and some of the best tips and tricks. I know that Google Web Stories itself has a checklist, but I'm going to share with you the ones that I have learned about. I spent like a Saturday YouTubing and looking up articles around web stories. It took me about 8 hours to kind of find some of the best practices, and so I wanted to kind of jam it all into this video so that you guys have them, so that you're not spending a whole weekend trying to figure out Google Web Stories. So I'll go ahead and share with you all my best tips and also outline what I do in order to create a web story. So stay tuned. I'm going to give you guys the best tips that I have for Google Web Stories, as I have researched it in the last weekend to kind of better understand how it works, and basically if I invested in this content creation process, right? What is the ROI in terms of like the time I invested and the money that I'm making? And I wanted to kind of share with you in short that it drove a ton of traffic in a very short amount of time. But I think advertisers are still trying to figure out Google Web Stories. That is my hypothesis, but I'm going to go ahead and dive into the numbers and details, and also walk through like what you guys should do in terms of like your standard operating procedure when creating Google Web Stories, so that you have like a process and steps that you can basically look at to make sure that your web stories will show up. Okay. So first off, what are the benefits of Google Web Stories? Pros is that it's easy to create, meaning you can literally use, if you have a ton of photos on your site already, if you take a ton of photos or you have a lot of stock photos, they're really easy to create because you're reusing content. There's lots of traffic in a very short amount of time, and then you also get additional money for that additional traffic. So it's an additional revenue stream. The con is that it's potentially one-time traffic. So Google right now is testing this content type, and so they're putting a lot of emphasis on this type of content, and it might go away if they decide that they don't want to do it anymore, kind of like Google Plus. Do you remember that? So then also it's an additional process and maintenance that you have to consider. So I would think of this as a new platform, if you will. Like, for if you guys don't already know, you can't be everywhere, like omnipresent successfully, right? So if you kind of hone in on the platform, like for example, if you are a blogger, if you hone in on like SEO, you'll do well at SEO, but you can't do like content creation on your blog and your Facebook and Pinterest as a one-man show and be successful at it. Some people can, but typically, if you are honed in one channel and one platform that you're maintaining, that's great. This will add to the maintenance. So you're basically extending your brand or whatever you're working on with an additional channel that you have to now maintain. There's also low ROI for now. So when I look at the numbers, I'll show you how the numbers match up. There's low ROI until advertisers understand how to use this and are aware of it. Some of the larger players in terms of like advertisers, like big box companies who need to advertise, they have big systems that they have to maintain to create like this content, right? And so the content for ads. So overall, I think it's a newer platform, and so advertisers are or people who want to advertise want to take the time to understand it and understand the ROI, which means that it might be low revenue for us publishers until they kind of figure that out. And then also there's an initial learning curve, which isn't too bad. I watched a ton of different YouTube videos that gave me like the details that I need, but it's a pretty intuitive plugin once you kind of figure it out. All right, my beginner blogger tips for this content type is that if you are at a point with your blog where you have less than 50 blog posts, I would recommend you just continue creating blog posts and not focus on this content right now, okay? Like, seriously, if you only have 50 blog posts, go create 50 more and then come back to this as an opportunity for you to increase your traffic. And then other things that I've learned as I went through this process is that if you are taking photos for, let's say, a project, and it's important to me because I am a DIY blogger as well, and I know a lot of like lifestyle bloggers take a lot of photos and then they cull means like you're like picking different photos that you want to include in the blog post. What I would recommend is actually at this point in the game, like, you create those images, and actually upload them to your WordPress site and then have them as stock images even if they're not in your blog post. The reason why I say that is because in this process, I was actually revisiting some of my old folders that had all the older images and raw files that I hadn't edited, and I was uploading them to create these like web stories. So as you begin to create content for your blog, I would recommend also that when you're taking photos, think of it as a stock image creation process as well, not just specifically for your blog. So that's something that I learned along the way as I created web stories. All right, let's talk about the numbers real quick. So I have two blogs, a food blog and a lifestyle blog, and I wanted to show you like the traffic from the food blog and the lifestyle blog so that you guys can compare. For the food blog, I started September 11th, added my first web story. As you can see, look at this. Like, this is the number of users. Look at the page views within a like 14, this is like 3-day time period. It brought in a ton of traffic, right? And it's still continuing to like give me traffic day to day. But overall, I had like 2 to 3 web stories at this point, and it literally took me 10 minutes to do, and it was insane. And this traffic right here is only for the web story because I had to create a Google Analytics property to basically capture the web story separate from the actual blog. So I wanted to show you guys these numbers. Literally, I was amazed. I started seeing like that night, maybe not that night, but the night after I implemented it, I saw like 25 people in real time, like on our blog. So that was pretty insane to me, actually. Okay, so as you can see here, this is, you're probably wondering, okay, you have a property for your web story versus a property for your actual blog content. How much of that traffic for a web story actually was driven back to like the website? So let me kind of give you an overview real quick of what a web story looks like as you guys look at these numbers, okay? So this is an example of a web story. And as you can see, I have one of the best practices I'll share with you guys is have about 10 to 12 slides. So as you can see, this is like a noodle, basically a web story that they're clicking through. And you can see full recipe with tips here. If you click on it, it takes it to the blog. When they click on it, the analytics numbers now basically track that it is a Discover organic web story. And it literally drove 2,000 users to our site, which means that overall I would get advertisement money from the actual blog itself separate from the web story. I kind of hope that makes sense. If not, listen a little bit further so I can kind of explain it. So here's a lifestyle blog. As you can see, I started a little bit later I created one story and it didn't do well. And I created a second story like around this time frame and it started picking up. And as you can see, within that same time period, I got 7,900 page views versus for the lifestyle or for the food blog, it was like 13,000 page views. So clearly a difference in terms of niche. It might be because I also only had about 2 web stories at this point for the actual lifestyle blog. And then here, what had happened is that I actually didn't include the URL parameters, so I couldn't track like this for the food blog, the source, medium, and campaign. And I'll show you exactly how you guys can do that here in a second. But if you don't track the URL parameters, you won't be able to actually see how many web stories actually drove people to your actual blog itself, okay? Even though the web story is on your blog, what I'm saying is how many people actually went to the blog post after your web story. And so in order to set this up for my lifestyle blog, I didn't do that. So I'm going to show you guys exactly how you can basically have the source, campaign, so that you can see the numbers in terms of conversion to your blog. All right, so let's look at the numbers real quick because I know you guys are interested. How much money did this bring? Between September 10th to September 17th, this is the amount of money that it brought. From a lifestyle blog, it brought in $20.14. And then for the food blog, it brought in $10.09. So not much so far, but it is still something. And as web stories starts to grow, hopefully it grows, I can only imagine that that number continues to increase. So long story short, it does bring in money, not as much as I was hoping, but at the same time, it was really easy to create and also allows me to create more content. I know a lot of courses that I've taken have said and shared with their course people that like doesn't have a high ROI right now to invest in it, if you're just purely looking at the ROI perspective, that is completely accurate. But as I kind of understand what Google's intentions are in terms of creating content and being more like, having like other ways to consume content, I can see this actually growing. So I'm not invested for the ROI based on what the data says right now. I'm investing in the content because I can see where they're going with it. And so I'm going to continue creating content on web stories for that reason alone. And then as you can see here, like I also have, I can't remember if this is the lifestyle blog or the food blog, but you can also see events, and you can see the event categories and basically how many web stories, like I covered like the web story names, but you can see how many of those web stories actually got seen. So there's that. All right, so here are my biggest tips, just basically combined in a nutshell for you. First of all, you have the one-time implementation tips that I'm going to share with you, and then you have the daily web story content creation or routine content creation tips. Okay, so for the one-time implementation tips, I would recommend that you create a Google Analytics web property and add it to your site that is separate from your main blog Google Analytics web property. And I'll go ahead and link to a Mediavine post that kind of walks you through how to do that. And then making sure that you add the filtering per Mediavine's blog post. Even if you're not with Mediavine, they have a great blog post that kind of shares with you how to actually do that. And then you'll want to add a Google Web Story plugin. So the Google Web Story plugin, what it is, let me show you guys what that looks like. So here, there's a stories plugin that you just add, and then it has like a dashboard where you can see all of the web stories. You can explore templates, all stories, and like there's a bunch of settings that you can do as well. So that is basically how you install Google Web Story. You add a plugin and then you install it and then you set it all up. And then you create your first web story. So I would recommend following my next set of steps that I share with you. But in order to create your first web story, go through those steps and then go back here and then make sure that you kind of check this all out. So what happens when you create your first Google Web Story is that, number one, you will get a link like this for your web story, okay? And then if you go to the AMP site, you can click on test URL. And then what it will do is that Google will say whether or not your URL is AMP ready or not. And as this is loading, I'm going to share with you how I name my URLs here for my web stories. Is I add web-story at the end of the URL because the actual blog post is this best authentic Lao noodles soup. And then after that, I don't have web story. So that's how I kind of like match up what's a web story versus what's a blog post. And so as you can see, it says valid AMP page. Now, when I first installed the plugin and created my first web story and put the link in here just to validate it, it actually said invalid. I'll share with you guys like a image of what that looked like. And what I had to do was actually work with Big Scoots to figure that out. Big Scoots is my hosting provider. If you guys have a managed server or a host that manages like your WordPress site for you, they may be able to help you fix this issue. But I do know that there are like conflicts with the Google Web Stories plugin and Yoast if you're using Yoast, and so that would cause you to do an invalid AMP page. Ask Big Scoots like what they did to like make the changes and make it work, because I had to go do it for both the lifestyle and food blog. They gave me a really technical answer, so I'll go ahead and paste that down below so that you guys can say the right things to your host as well to get it fixed. But I don't know what they did, to be honest, and they fixed it for both sites and it started working and showing valid properties. But I do know for a fact that at the time of this recording, there was a conflict with Yoast as well as the Google Web Stories. All right, tracking parameter links. So tracking parameter links are also known as like UTM parameters. I think that it's universal tracking something or another. But anyway, what you want to do is that when you're in your web story here, so if you are linking to like your blog post here, see how it says full recipes with tips. When you're in your web story, I'm gonna go ahead and click on it and click on open an editor so that you guys can see what that looks like. If you highlight this just like this, what I want to do is highlight the actual box. See how the blue line shows up? For this page attachment, what you want to do is add the link to your blog post, but copying, pasting something specific. So here, if you do UTM source, discover, medium, organic, web story, you can see here source, medium, campaign. If I go back here, so you guys can see the link, you can see here it says discover organic web story. And so that's how you get metrics into Google Analytics so that you can track how well your web story is doing related to clicks back to your actual blog. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Again, you're linking this link onto your web story. And then what this allows you to do is every time you click on it, kind of like Google Analytics like tracks everything, this section right here will allow you to, in Google Analytics for your blog, track what of those clicks were from a web story. I hope that helps. The reason why I think it's important is because I can use those numbers. So however many web stories actually drove traffic, I can then compare overall, like what percentage of traffic did it drive to the site. So for our food blog, it drove 2,000 page views, and I normally get like 50,000 page views. So whatever 2 over 50 is, that's like 4% of traffic, right? And so I can continually check and trend to see if that increases as I continue to create more web stories, which I think it will. And to be honest, like with web stories, it takes about 2 to 3 days for Google to kind of index it and then start showing it into various places, like on the Google app where they have web stories kind of located there. So anyway, this is a really great way to basically track the traffic coming from your web stories. I didn't do it for the lifestyle blog, and as you guys can tell, I probably need to go back and add this UTM parameter as well. All right, so content creation process. What I would recommend is create the first slide first, and then add the links with the UTM parameters in it, meaning go in here and add this. And then what you can do is if you highlight this box, not the image, but the box, you can hit duplicate. And each time you do that, you don't have to copy and paste the URL anymore, which is great. All right, the second thing you want to do is you want to update the title here, okay? Add the URL again, and then also you'll want to add any boxes. So here I just created this box, and then whenever I copied and pasted, I just moved it around. So it made it a lot easier, and all I had to do was change some of the verbiage. And like I said here, duplicate sides, add text, make sure it's 26 font, save the font style if you wanted to do it for the first time, and then add about 10 to 12 slides. The 7th slide is usually the ad, so let me kind of show you what that looks like. Let me count. I'm pretty sure it's the 7th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, 8. So the 8th one is the ad. And then on the last slide, add the call to action with a pick of you to find more info. So here, I showed a picture of my mom, and I basically said full recipes with tips. So that's what I did there. And then pretty much publish and test using Google AMP site checker. So take this link and go to AMP test checker, and then make sure that it says valid AMP page. If there's something wrong, then go ahead and figure out like what happened. Also though, I will say that they also have a checklist down below here to make sure that you've like followed all their design accessibility processes below, but it's pretty intuitive. This left side is where you like drag images, the right is like design, there's a document, and if you go through it, obviously make sure that you're using all the fields as much as you can to fill out, but it's a pretty easy way to create content, to be honest. And then monitoring process to kind of measure your traffic is, again, check Google Analytics for web stories to see how well each web story is performing, and then check your Google Analytics for your main blog, and then you can see the URL tracking parameters to see how much traffic was driven to the web story. And then my last tip, I already mentioned this, is as you guys are creating images for your blog, use it as stock graphics so you can reuse content forever and ever. You should have learned this if you are creating content for Pinterest or for other platforms, but I think it, like the web story piece of it, just made me realize that, you know, I was wasting a lot of time culling images and just picking like 1 or 2 and not editing some of the rest, because those images could have been reused in other blog posts and in other platforms. So that's my tip to you of lessons learned from me implementing web stories. In short, I think that the ROI will be there. It's not there yet, but I think it will be there, and it's trending towards like having a ton of traffic from Google. So that's what's really exciting for me. So I think I will actually be creating more content for web stories and kind of will let you know like how it does. I'll share with you guys other things I learned along the way as well. I hope you guys liked that video. If you did, don't go yet. I have some more tutorials around how I use Notion as my content creation, so go ahead and check that video out, as well as another video on some of my best blogging tips as well. And if you guys really like this video, go ahead and click on the like button. That will really help me out and the YouTube algorithm out to show more videos like this to you. Thank you so much. And if you guys want to, go ahead and subscribe to the newsletter where I share my best tips on Fridays, basically, if I can get to it, so that I'm sharing with you honestly the things that I am implementing on my own blog site, so that you guys can learn with me and basically grow your blog alongside me. So thank you so much and have a great day.